Welcome to the Golden Hour, the podcast community where moms and moms-to-be hear stories from other mothers and top experts in the pregnancy and postpartum care field. You can visit goldenhour.fm for more information, resources, and all other episodes. You can also find us at goldenhour.fm on Instagram for comments and questions. Welcome to today's episode of The Golden Hour. I'm your host, Dr. O, and today I'm joined by sleep specialist, Tracie Kesatie. Tracie is a certified gentle sleep coach with over 10 years of professional experience. She also holds her bachelor's degree in psychology and her master's degree in counseling. She lives in LA, raising her 4 children. In addition to being passionate about sleep, she loves baking, Pilates, and spending time with her friends and family. Welcome, Tracie.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
I am so excited to have you. At this point, I've had a whole kind of diverse cadre of guests, but you are my first sleep specialist. And I honestly think that sleep is probably one of the most important topics for families and postpartum moms, because that is probably one of the biggest drastic changes in your life when you bring that newborn home, as you go from, the pleasant adulthood life that my husband and I currently live, because we don't have children, where we set our sleep schedules, we set our alarms, we get our 7 to 8 hours a night on average. And then suddenly this tiny newborn says, I've got different plans, and you have to figure out how to adjust. And I know for me as an OB, I'm constantly challenged in my way of showing up for my patients and supporting them through that transition, but I am not an expert like you. So I'm going to learn a lot from you. Everyone that listens today is going to get to learn a lot. So grateful to have you today, Tracie.
So glad to be here.
There's so many thoughts about kind of sleep training with newborns and how to do it best or better, or what are the kind of common myths, would you say, around sleep training, and what do you do to bust those myths?
Yeah, great question. So, one of the big things that comes up, one of the big myths, is that you can sleep train a baby right out of the womb. So babies are not born with circadian rhythms. They're not born with the capacity to consistently self-soothe, nor is there a place for that pattern to land until at least 4 months of age. So, in the beginning, it really is just about maybe creating a few good little sleep hygiene, some good habits to have in place. But in the first few months of life, it's really about bonding, creating a healthy attachment, getting to know this new person that's living in your home.
Yeah.
So as far as like sleep training or sleep coaching, however you want to refer to it, that's not something we look at until at least 4 to 5 months of age, age adjusted. Now, as far as the other big myth is that sleep training means cry it out. And you hear this a lot, parents saying, well, I don't want to sleep train because it means leaving my baby to cry it out. And that obviously doesn't feel right to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And as a certified gentle sleep coach, I always like to kind of jump in there and go, it doesn't have to be cry it out. Unfortunately, there's no such thing as a no cry sleep solution, but you can use a responsive one. You can use a method where you're physically present, offering reassurance to your baby or toddler. And so I like people to know that, because I feel like they think that's the only option. And obviously that doesn't feel great to a lot of people.
Yeah. What does it look like to, as you said, there's no kind of cry-free zone, but what does it look like to be physically present while also giving the newborn space to kind of reassure themselves and settle themselves back in?
So generally when we're using a gentle method, it has a parent or caregiver physically present, offering both verbal and, in the beginning, physical support as well. So, if the little one is upset, if they are frustrated, if they are crying, the parent or caregiver is right there offering that loving reassurance. Are we doing the work for them? No, because that's obviously the point of sleep training, is having a little one learn how to self-soothe, how to regulate, how to settle. And the analogy I use a lot, which I think is really going to resonate with you, is it's sort of, if a woman's in the delivery room, if their partner's not an OB, they can't deliver the baby. But you want their support. Most, women that are, in the delivery room want their partner there. They want their partner nearby, holding their hand, rubbing their back, helping to count during the pushes, whatever it is.
Yeah.
They want their partner there. And I sort of think that that's what gentle sleep coaching is. It's having the support of your loved one right there versus your partner is in the waiting room on their phone, not even in the room with you.
Not ideal. Yeah.
I think that really resonates. It clicks for a lot of parents where they're like, I get that. My partner's not delivering the baby for me, but I want them there. I want that support. I want to have them, rubbing my shoulder and holding my hand and being with me through the process.
Yeah. And so in your 10 years of vast experience, and let alone your own personal experience as a mother of 4, I always say anyone who gets up to 4 kids, you're just showing off. We're really good at it. But yeah, in your vast experience, what would you say are kind of the most common struggles that parents experience when trying to deal with newborn sleep?
With newborns, a lot of short naps, babies not wanting to be in the bassinet or crib because it's very foreign to them. They've been in the womb, in this aquatic environment, in a ball, constant food, temperature regulated. So being flat on their back, in a swaddle where they look like a hot dog, that's very unfamiliar to them.
Yeah.
And so they don't love it. So it takes, practice to get used to it. So that's a big struggle is, I get a lot of calls, we're having a really hard time getting our baby into the bassinet, and they're looking for tips and tricks. Short naps, as I said, babies will love to be on a parent or caregiver. It helps them regulate. So newborns, they want to snooze on mom or dad.
Yeah.
And then mom or dad are like, but it doesn't work at night. And I'm like, oh yeah, no, I get it. Cause that's not a safe thing.
Yeah. And so how do you approach that? Right. Because you're right. So many of my moms who come and see me postpartum, we're talking about the physical recovery, but we're also talking about the mental recovery and that feeling of like, okay, well, my baby's only sleeping on my chest, which means either they're up all hours of the night with a baby on their chest, which, as you said, isn't ideal and not necessarily the safest sleeping position. How do you help patients, or rather your clients, kind of transition from daytime sleep patterns to like what they should be able to do at nighttime?
So I usually suggest trying to put the baby down at least once a day in a bassinet or crib because it does take practice. And if a baby is held all day long, then when you try to put them into the bassinet at night, they're kind of like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
This isn't what we do. So, and I tell them even 20 minutes, even if the baby only sleeps 20 minutes in the bassinet for that nap during the day, I'd call it a victory. Hey, it was 20 minutes. Yeah, you probably didn't get much rest yourself or you didn't get much done, but that was practice. So practicing a bit during the day, also figuring out what works for your baby. Like with my 4 kids, how I was able to transition them into the bassinet was different for each of them. Some of them needed to be in a deep or quiet stage of sleep before I could put them in. Others I was able to put down when they were still kind of drowsy and I could kind of sit there and maybe pat them gently on their chest or jiggle gently the rest of the way to sleep. So it's a little bit about figuring out what works for your baby. But it definitely takes some practice because the nighttime scenario is tough. It's really hard if you're we can't get the baby into the bassinet. The other thing I always check with people is that sometimes the babies are really rejecting the bassinet because they have something like silent reflux, or there's something making it physically more challenging for them to be flat on their back. And a lot of babies do have that immature digestive system. So sometimes the reason they're just really not taking to it and they really don't want to be in there is because there's something bugging them.
Yeah. How does a parent figure out that their baby might be dealing with silent reflux? Is that something that they can talk to a gentle sleep coach like you to help them decipher? Should they bring that up with their pediatrician?
So I definitely tell parents, in my opinion, no question's a silly question. So I'm like, anything you're observing with your baby, like definitely bring to the pediatrician. If you're like, well, we've noticed the baby's really gassy. Like, yes, do babies have gas? Of course. But like, sometimes parents are like, it feels excessive. And I'm like, that's worth mentioning. If you feel like your baby is like arching their back while they're feeding or right after feeding, clenching their fists. Sometimes you see them pulling off the breast or the bottle where they're like really agitated during the feed. You start to say, okay, well, that doesn't feel right. Like parents usually have a really great intuition. And I think if nothing, like we're like second guessing ourselves, like, well, no, it's fine. I'm overreacting. And like, no, like these are really good observations and it's great to bring in to the doctor. I'm happy to kind of go through it with parents, certainly not diagnosing on my end, but sometimes I'll say, gee, your baby has a lot of signs of something like a silent reflux. And I would definitely check with your pediatrician because, you can't ask, as you know, every single question when you're having a visit with a patient. And so it's helpful when patients come in and they're like, I'm experiencing this, or, I want to talk about this. Like, it's great as a physician. It's great for me as a coach. When parents bring that to us.
Yeah, agreed. And I realized I was so excited to talk with you and absorb all your knowledge that as I was doing a deep dive, I actually want to take a pause and learn what brought you to the space of being a gentle sleep coach. Why did you end up choosing to make this your way of supporting families?
Yeah. I mean, I think, how I got into it is probably how a lot of sleep coaches get into it, which was personal experience.
Yeah.
So I do have my, as you mentioned, bachelor's in psychology and master's degree in counseling. I love working with people. I love helping people. But when my oldest was born, was not a great sleeper. He was not one of those babies where I was like, oh, look, he's tired. I can just put him down. Like he was that baby that only wanted to sleep being held. I was like, I can't be going on a stroller walk 24 hours a day. This isn't sustainable.
Yeah.
And I just found that it was impacting my mental health. I was really sleep deprived. I was exhausted. He was exhausted. And I basically was at a dinner party and heard about a sleep coach. And this was 18 years ago. This was not a big thing back then. Yeah. And I was like, oh, what? And the mom was like, yeah, I hired this person. She gave me a plan. She, gave me some support and my baby's sleeping great. And I was like, I would love that information. Hired this sleep coach. She did the same thing for me. She gave me a plan. We had some coaching calls and my baby went from this bleary-eyed, exhausted little baby to a little man that was sleeping like 12 hours a night. And I was just a happier, healthier mom. Like I had the energy to take him to do things. We were all having so much more fun during the day. Yeah. And so I started kind of having friends of friends reach out to me being like, hey, I heard you did this with your son. Can you give me some tips? And at some point I just thought, why am I not doing this? Yeah. Why? I'm like, this fits nicely with my counseling background. Yeah. I'm passionate about sleep. I'm definitely someone that needs a lot of sleep myself. I saw what an amazing thing it did for my family. And so I was like, I'm going to research, certification programs because, if I'm going to do this, I want to do it right. Yeah. And I found the Gentle Sleep Coaching Program, which is like the largest program out there. And I liked the philosophy, of it being a little bit more holistic, giving parents the gentler option. I say gentler because sometimes people hear gentle and they think no crying. And I'm like, no, I wish. Yeah. But I'm trained in all the different methods. So, it's really, I just liked their philosophy on like, there's just different ways you can support parents, like meeting them where they're at. Mm-hmm. And that really vibed for me. So I got my certification over 10 years ago and been doing it since.
I say that sometimes the most impassioned projects come from frustration. So for you, it was, dealing with the usual angst and fatigue and physical, emotional exhaustion of being a new mom, first time mom, and then being inspired to actually pay it forward. And not only in your smaller, tight knit community of your friends, but obviously expanded to probably goodness, thousands, tens of thousands of families that you helped so far in the past 10 years. For me, this podcast is my passion project that spurred from really feeling like we're not supporting pregnant persons, let alone postpartum persons as well enough, and hoping that we can bring all those resources kind of at hand in a tighter package that is conversations like this. And so I'm always inspired when I meet a fellow kindred spirit of someone who kind of turned pain into passion and something productive. And it's just so beautiful what you've done with your own journey so far. You mentioned kind of when you met with your personal sleep coach with your son, that you were given kind of a list or a package of things to try, and seeing your son transform as a baby, let alone your ability to have your relationship with him and your energy transform. When you sit down with a client, kind of what is a package that you would give them, or what is a kind of a set of instructions or tips that you would give them?
So for sleep coaching, I like to call it coaching versus training. For sleep coaching clients, we always are going over things like age appropriate sleep schedule, because sleep begets sleep. I like to go over just general educational sleep information, because as a mom myself, I find information is just so helpful. Like, knowledge is power.
Yes.
So if nothing else, I want parents to walk away going, I'm so glad to know that that's normal, or it's not just me. Like, I remember feeling that way, feeling very isolated as a new mom, and thinking like, is it just me? Is it just my baby that's having such a hard time sleeping? Yeah. So I want parents to sort of feel like it's not just me, and understand what is normal. What does sleep look like at whatever age it is? And then, as I mentioned, I am a certified gentle sleep coach, so I like working with these more supportive, responsive methods. But I like to work with each family on an individual basis to kind of figure out what method is the right fit for them. Because at the end of the day, the keys to success are commitment and consistency. Yeah. And so I could give someone the best plan ever, but if it's something that they feel like they can't commit to, then they're not going to be consistent. So I like to work with each family to figure out, like, what do you feel like you can commit to and be consistent with? And sometimes I'm modifying plans to fit families. So I can have two families using the same method, but they're doing it differently because the situations are different. Sometimes you have families where the parents work late, the child's in daycare. Other families, they might be in a different place. So culturally, families are sometimes in different places. So I really like to be respectful of that while still kind of focusing on how to sleep work. Sometimes people will come to me with sleep goals of like, we want the baby to go to bed at 10 p.m. and, sleep till 10 a.m. And I'm like, like, we can't have everything, or we don't want any crying. And I'm like, I want that for you too, but that's probably not going to happen, So I like to be realistic with people, but also, as I mentioned, meet them where they're at. Yeah.
Amy, every family has individual needs and goals. I also really appreciate kind of thinking about them with their cultural differences, their lifestyle differences, their work schedules. All of that can vary so much. And so what you're doing is you're kind of acting like a chameleon, and you're kind of switching between each family, and kind of, as you listen to them, interpreting what it feels like they need. And meanwhile, trying to balance their goals with realistic expectations too, which is really helpful, because it's the dream to have a baby that like sleeps 12 hours. And I have friends who are at that place now. Some of my friends with newer kiddos, and I'm happy for them, but it takes time to get there for sure. As we've been talking, you've kind of, I think, helped clarify some of these stages, right? So I, as an OB, because most of my time with my postpartum moms are up until that first 1 to 2 months postpartum. And then I don't see them sometimes again until a year later when they're due for a pap smear. So I oftentimes fast forward in time. But when you think about stages of sleep from the early newborn stage to maybe first year or so of life to toddler stage, how do you separate that in terms of expectations for sleep for families, like what's normal, what to expect, etc.?
Yeah. So I usually kind of take babies under 4 months, we're looking at that as like newborn days. This is at most sleep hygiene or sleep education. of like, what is normal? What does sleep look like? Are there a few tips and tricks and things you can do to kind of, make life easier? Yes. But really, we're not doing any sleep coaching at this point. They're just too little for that. So, my biggest takeaways for that age group are: one, there's no such thing as bad habits. As long as you're following safe sleep practices, that's all that matters. And two, that whole feeling of guilt, like I'm doing something wrong. There's a lot of parents that feel like, they're doing something wrong by like rocking their newborn to sleep or feeding their newborn to sleep. And, if anything, my greatest joy is helping ease that guilt, so that they'd understand like that's completely okay. And it's what you're supposed to do. Babies don't have that capacity to do it themselves. So I kind of treat that group separately. As far as sleep training for me, that's 5 months to 10 years of age. That's my sort of certification range.
Okay.
And with those, like, obviously I'm tackling it a little bit differently depending on it, with, kids up to 6, it's really just kind of, again, those age appropriate sleeps, what's going on developmentally at those stages, kind of going over the age appropriate schedule, the plans, the methods that kind of work for those different ages. For kids 6 to 10, I'm usually working in conjunction with another provider, because usually when we're having sleep challenges with kids in the 6 to 10-year-old range, there might be something underlying like obstructive sleep apnea, anxiety, family trauma, things like this. And so I, in those cases, find it incredibly helpful to work, another appropriate provider, whether it's a therapist or a medical professional, to kind of support the family in those situations.
Yeah, very helpful. This often comes up, the term regression, sleep regression. What is, big sigh from you? You're like, oh, yes, sleep regression.
Very common.
Very common, very hot topic. Can you help us? What is sleep regression, and when does it commonly happen, and what are our ways to manage that?
Yeah, so great question. So sleep regressions are a real thing. And really, I think they should be called progressions, because it's really a sign of a step forward. It's where the brain is sort of going through a growth spurt, making new connections. A lot of times this is when babies are going through these new developmental leaps or new developmental skills. So a lot of times these are kind of coinciding, where like, oh, the baby's learning to walk. Oh, we hit the 12-month sleep regression. So a lot of times these things are going hand in hand. And a lot of times it's also a growth spurt. So it's really a period of development and change, but that period of development and change can absolutely wreak havoc on not only sleep, but feeding as well. So one of the hallmarks of sleep regressions is changes in appetite, where some little ones will get more hungry because they are going through that growth spurt. And in other cases, they're just not eating as well during the day because they're too busy. No, there's too much to see. There's too much to do. They don't want to stop to eat. And so parents are like, the baby's not feeding as well. And now, of course, what happens? The baby's waking more at night because they're hungry, because they're not feeding as well during the day. And as far as sleep regressions, there's a few of them, but not every little one goes through every regression. So like a lot of people hear about the 4-month sleep regression. That's a big one. Of my 4 kids, only one of them was like impacted by that. Yeah. 3 of them, their sleep was fine. It wasn't really any different. And then one of them, it was like back to newborn days of like, oh my goodness, what's going on? And I was a sleep coach and I was thinking that. So yeah. I definitely, even as a sleep coach, can totally throw you. And there's no way to predict, what baby's going to go through what regression or the degree to which it's going to impact them. The 4-month regression, there's not a whole lot we can do to kind of get through. Like, you just got to get through it. You just got to try your best to get the best age appropriate naps possible and just kind of ride it out. With the later regressions, there's one that can happen around 6 months, one in that 8 to 10 month range, another one around a year. Sometimes we hit one around 15 or 18 months, and then one at 2 months, and one at 2 years, and then one at 3 years. But again, not every little one's going to hit necessarily every regression. Yeah. With those later ones, generally the rule of thumb is just stay the course. And this is true with new developmental skills, even to some degree with teething. The more, especially if you have like really nice, healthy sleep habits in place, the more you just stay consistent, the less disruptive it is. It's when parents unintentionally create new habits during these regressions where they're like, oh, we went back to feeding the baby 2-3 times at night, but we hadn't been feeding the baby for months. That's when they end up in a situation where the regression subsides, but the baby now has the habit of eating to 2-3 times a night, and that doesn't subside. So I usually tell people, like, to the best of your ability, try to stay the course. So if you don't offer night feeds anymore, your pediatrician has said your baby doesn't need a night feed and you haven't offered one for months, when you're going through the regression, don't reintroduce it, because your baby doesn't understand adult logic. They don't know that that's only being offered because the baby's in a regression. Yeah. All they know is this is an option again. Fabulous.
Yeah. Thank you.
And they're going to take the easier road, right? Like they're going to be like, you'll come feed me back to sleep. Amazing. So, and then parents are like, here we are.
What do I do?
Yeah. Either they think the regression has never ended because it's like they're in this pattern, or they're just like, we got stuck and what do we do?
Yeah. Oh man, Tracie, as I already alluded to at the beginning of our conversation, my husband and I are yet to be decided on starting our own family. But as I'm hearing you, I'm literally like taking mental notes. I was like, okay, I think I have her email. I can just email her again if we have kids, because it's everything you're saying so far is so gold. And it's obviously hard when you're in the moment and you're sleep deprived and you're stressed to like remember these things. But to be able to kind of go back and pause and listen to this episode, listen to your sage words. It's so invaluable. It's so great. So I'd like to take a moment to tell you this is my passion project based on years of experience as an OB/GYN doctor. I aim to empower moms and moms-to-be and those in the pregnancy and postpartum care space. If you appreciate what I do, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share with your friends so it can reach more people like you. You can visit goldenhour.fm for more information, resources, and all other episodes. If you have any requests, suggestions, or questions for future episodes, please email me at hello@goldenhour.fm or leave us a comment at goldenhour.fm on Instagram. As I think more about all the many challenges related to sleep, I think something that you and I alluded to earlier in our conversation is oftentimes the goal with sleep coaching, I want to make sure I'm using your phrasing correctly, is, balancing what the baby needs and knowing that the babies are transitioning and learning to sleep in something that isn't as comfortable and warm as the womb, but also being like, that desire for both parents, or if it's a single parent by choice, that one parent, to get back into a groove, if you will. How do you kind of support parents as they are trying to balance babies' needs with their desires to have a real life, quote unquote?
Yeah. And for me, I think it's really important. I work with some moms. I've had a couple of dads as well who have like postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression. And that's like a really important component. Like sometimes parents are starting sleep coaching maybe a little bit sooner than they had initially wanted to, or maybe they're having to sleep coach when they never thought before maybe having baby that this was something they were going to do. But I look at it like, the parent's well-being is an important part of this process. So it's not just about baby, but it's about parents too. So I really, kind of take that into consideration when I'm working with families, when we're formulating a plan, in terms of how much support also they need. Some parents are going, especially like a single parent, they may need some more support, just even if it's just the emotional support across the phone or across email, they maybe don't have that because they don't have a partner in the home. But, it's also, trying to find a way, like, even with 4 kids, I value sleep. I make sure that, we're home for bedtimes and things like that. But, people also have to have a life. So it's also about trying to find some balance so that parents, can go to the gym if that's a priority to them, or have date night, or, some people, like a lot of people will say, I want like grandma or grandpa or the babysitter to be able to put our child to bed so we can go have a date night. And I'm like, yeah, that's important. I mean, it's all multifaceted. So sometimes I feel like I'm putting on my counselor hat. Yeah. Sometimes I'm putting on my sleep coach hat. Sometimes I'm just putting on my mom hat and just being like, I can relate, like
that's
I've been
so
there.
Powerful. Yeah, that's so powerful. I think oftentimes when I have conversations like this, I think about my girlfriends, because they're, besides my own work experience, which inspired the podcast, it's the people that I'm closest to that have inspired me, as they've shared their stories of woe in the thick of motherhood, and their absolute joys and their triumphs too. Something that we've chatted about is traveling with the kiddo, right? And going abroad and changing time zones and trying to keep them on a sleep schedule. But is it their sleep schedule based on like US California time, or is it the sleep schedule where you are abroad? How do you give advice to those who are daring enough to take a newborn on a trip?
Yeah, well, first I call it relocation, not vacation.
Ooh.
Because really you're just relocating and doing the same thing, just somewhere else. So anybody with kids, especially anybody with toddlers, will probably relate to the fact that it doesn't necessarily feel like a vacation. You're not sitting in the lounge chair by the pool, sipping on a cocktail, relaxing, with a toddler. That's for sure.
Nope.
Newborns, they tend to be a little bit easier. They're a little bit more portable, if you will. They're, napping a lot. They can sleep in your arms, so sometimes parents do find it easier to travel with little ones that age. What I say is if you are traveling internationally, you do want to switch your little one over to local time. Okay. Because otherwise you're going to have the longest days of your life. And I say this as someone who's traveled to Europe with her kids. Yeah. Like, their body clock is off. Like, jet lag impacts children the same way it impacts us. So if you're have a big time difference, you're going to be wide awake in the middle of the night. You are going to be super tired during the day. But, you're going to work to get yourself onto local time where you're like, I got to get myself up out of bed in the morning so we can, go have a day. I'm going to try to get myself to bed, in the middle of the night. When I wake up, I'm not going to turn on the lights and start, doing stuff. I'm going to try to lay here and go back to sleep. So it's a lot of that for a baby. It's just harder because obviously, when the baby's up, you're up too. But, you just kind of keep trudging through, kind of helping them adjust to that local time. Exposure to sunlight and fresh air in the morning can be helpful, but really just trying to kind of get them to follow their regular schedule according to the clock wherever you're at.
Yeah. Yeah. So helpful. So helpful. My husband and I, we love traveling. It's probably our passion. So the idea that we can still travel, but not necessarily think of it as a vacation, rather relocation it's grounding, it's humbling, but it's important. It's very important. So many things that we can cover. I think one of the things I'd love to hear from you is when, and again, especially for me as an OB, you obviously have the honor of caring for the full kind of spectrum in terms of newborn up until age 10, but really thinking about that newborn stage. And I want to acknowledge that everyone's routine is going to be different because every family has a different need and pattern. But what does an ideal bedtime routine look like for a newborn? Or what are the things that kind of can help the family and the baby kind of get prepped for bedtime?
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of keeping it simple. So I suggest with little ones, just, if you don't, a lot of people don't do a bath every night, but maybe a little quick wipe down of the hands and, maybe under the chins, because usually there's several chins and the milk collects under there.
So cute.
Which is just so sweet.
Yes.
So just a little quick wipe down or a bath, fresh diaper, jammies. If pediatrician has said it's okay to do a little infant massage, that can be lovely. And then, sometimes parents are singing a lullaby. Generally, bedtime routines include a feeding, but simple. I mean, really just a series of a few soothing activities that you do in the same order before bed every night. And this routine starting about maybe 30 minutes, 45 if the baby really loves the bath or if the baby is a slower eater. maybe about 45 minutes before bed. With my own kids, when they were newborns, it was, a bath or a wipe down, depending on what night it was, fresh diaper, jammies. I would read like a little bedtime book. I read the same book every night. I got a little bit tired of it by child number 4, but I kind of was like, if I read the same book, it's like it starts to cue them. It's that routine of like, oh, mommy's reading Goodnight Moon again. They don't mind it. They're happy to hear the same thing over and over. And then, a nice bedtime feed, burping if baby was still up, and maybe some gentle like rocking or gentle bouncing. And that was it. Like I tell people, like, don't get in the habit of saying goodnight to every piece of furniture in your house, because I guarantee you within a few weeks, you're going to regret that this is now your new habit. Or when you have a toddler, when you're like, now bedtime routine is taking forever because we got to say goodnight to like everything.
Yeah.
Simple's good. And that's all they need, is just a series of soothing activities. And as they get older, that's maybe when you add in an extra book. So toddlers might have 2 or 3 books, but the routine is basically still the same, of like a bath, pajamas, when they get older, maybe brush your teeth, maybe a couple books, and then, a lullaby, or some people say prayers, just simple.
Yeah, I love it. Simplicity, which is so hard in our day and age, because I feel like we get inundated with so much information that adds unnecessary complexity. And so it's really nice to just break it down, like find a routine that works for you and keep it. Other things that I often think about and kind of field questions on and don't always have the answer for is naps, right? Newborns, as you said already, they sleep a lot more frequently, and that's kind of inherent. But there gets to be a certain age where there's a more expected sleep pattern with the, usual bedtime and maybe like one daytime nap. What age do you usually see parents transition their kids to kind of full night's rest and nap time? And when does that nap time go away? When can they be done with that daytime nap time?
Yeah. So, around, 4 months of age or any time thereafter, babies are able to follow a flexible sleep schedule. So we can have like what I call like a block of sleep at night, and then our naps, so at 4 months, babies are taking like 3 to 4 naps a day. And then obviously as children get older, the sleep needs decrease, the number of naps decrease. So most kids are on like a 1 nap schedule, somewhere around 15 to 18 months. That's when most kids are transitioning to 1 nap. And then most kids will hang on to that nap until somewhere between their 3rd and 4th birthday. So it's somewhere during, year 3 that most little ones either stop napping, or we need to reduce it or eliminate it altogether, because if they continue to nap, it then starts to lead to challenges at night. And I use one of my kids as an example for this all the time with my clients, but he was 3 years old at preschool napping. I would put him to bed at his regular, whatever it was, 8 o'clock bedtime. And he wouldn't call for us, wasn't popping out of the room. But I would hear him singing like Wheels on the Bus and Slippery Fish. And I was like, there was a whole concert coming from his bedroom. And he wasn't falling asleep till like 9:30 at night. And I went, oh, it's the nap. He's at the age where now the nap is starting to push bedtime too late, because he doesn't really need the nap. But then of course what would happen is he would go to bed so late that he would be exhausted the next day. He would want a nap. And so I tell parents all the time, I've been there. And like, we usually have to use the weekend as a way to step off the hamster wheel, because at home you can control what's happening with the nap versus daycare, preschool.
Yeah.
And then you just realize you're switching over to what we call quiet time at that point, where we're still kind of giving them some downtime, to look at books, listen to maybe an audio story, play quiet toys, where it's like, okay, you're going to have some quiet time. And quite frankly, as parents, we like to have that quiet time too. I tell people all the time, I'm like, just because you're home with your children doesn't mean you don't deserve a lunch break.
Yeah.
So, we all need a little bit of time to recharge. We're all much happier humans when we have a little bit of time to ourselves. Doing something hopefully a little bit pleasurable, not just like, unloading the dishwasher or this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, that quiet time can definitely be very helpful for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. So helpful. You have sat with so many clients probably in some of like the thickest of dark times of like pure exhaustion, physically, mentally, emotionally. What do you say to that client that says, oh my gosh, like, am I going to survive this? How can I endure this any longer? How do you get them through those moments?
Yeah. I mean, when I have my like introductory session with clients, I usually kind of ask like on a scale of 1 to 10, like, where are you at? Like in terms of like sustainability, are you at a 10 where you're like, I feel amazing. Let's just go to Hawaii. Like I have no care in the world. Or are you at a 1 where you are about to crack? Cause I'm like, we don't want you to be down at a 1. Because then you have nothing left in the tank and it is hard to get through it. And, at the end of the day, like this is a collaborative process. I'm here to provide you with the tools and the information and the support, but the parents are the ones that have to implement it. Because, even if a coach came to a house, they're only going to stay there for a couple of nights. Like the parents are the ones that are spending the next 18 years with the child. Yes. So they're the ones that have to, I think, be empowered to do it themselves. I think that's really an important piece of it. So they have to have something left in the tank to give to the process. So I usually try to make sure people are not at a 1. And if they are at a 1, then I usually say, okay, who can we enlist to come in and help you out so that we can get you up to like, I don't know, a 3? Yeah. So that you have something in the tank to do this. Lots of people want to send parents baby clothes and toys. And I'm like, at the end of the day, what's helpful is having someone, send meals. So parents don't have to worry about, I got to cook and I was holding the baby all day. Or like coming over to help. Help so mom can nap during the day.
The dishwasher for them.
Well, the dishwasher, like, being able to have, or like, some people have the luxury, or I've seen people like chip in to hire like a postpartum doula for parents that have had a baby. I mean, that kind of support is invaluable in my opinion, so that parents, do have some outside support, whether it's paid or friends or family. Like that is just so helpful. Like I remember after kid number 1, I was like, I don't want registry things. Yeah.
I don't need that stuff.
I don't know. Because even if I was like, oh, I'll go get the diaper genie. I'll go get that stuff myself. What I could use is just the support of like, you're coming over and I don't feel like I've spent all day by myself with the baby. Yeah. Even if you're just coming to talk to me. Yeah. That was lovely. Or you came and brought lunch and we had lunch together. Or you came and you held the baby so I could shower. Yeah. Because it's hard. If you get down to that 1 and there's just nothing left in the tank, it is hard to work on those habits. Yeah, it's hard to go up from there. So many of the kind of pieces of advice and insights you gave about trying to bring someone out of that 1 just refers back to this concept that keeps on coming up on the podcast, is the idea of village, right? That you are not meant to be in isolation, that even if it's just you and your partner or your primary support person, that's probably not sufficient, because honestly, as a human species, we're in villages. And so when I think about amazing people like you as gentle sleep coaches and the lactation consultants and the postpartum doulas and the friends and this, we're all just bringing in these resources, whether paid or those that we already know and love, to recreate that village. And I think that is such an important reminder time and time again. And I love that it organically comes up in every episode, because it's so true. That's what we're all of us who are here working in the space of maternal health. We all are just trying to bolster and recreate that village, because it's just so, so important. Yeah, no. And we've sadly lost it with modern times. We don't necessarily live near family, we're all spread out. And where I live in the Los Angeles area, everybody's really spread out. Like I have friends that live, 40 minutes away. Like because LA was built out, not up. Yeah. So it's particularly hard here, I think, for new parents, but just anywhere, and so I tell people, like, you could have your virtual village, because, it's great if you can get someone to come into home to help, but if you can't, like, at least having a support system, whether it's mental health, lactation, sleep, because a lot of these things can be done virtually. And so I just think it's so nice for families to not feel like it's just them, that they're alone, because it's incredibly isolating. I remember feeling very lonely with my first, where I was home all day by myself, with this beautiful baby, but this baby that wouldn't sleep, know, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing right or wrong. And I wish back then there was what exists now, services or resources, because I know that I certainly would have, had I known if something like that existed, would have been all over it. Because just to know, like, it's not just me, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
But to me, that's a gift.
Yeah, such a gift. And it's something that we all we can't take for granted. We're in very different day and age, right? Because of social media and the pandemic, for better or for worse, has kind of shifted things so that we realize, oh yeah, telehealth, virtual care, virtual services, it's something that we can access. And I think honestly, in the best case, can overcome barriers that cause disparities in healthcare when people otherwise couldn't get to clinics or couldn't get to physical spaces. So really great that we have the technology to allow people to also just access virtual care.
Yeah.
When I think about my own personal patients who potentially could become clients of yours in the future, how would someone know that they need to seek out a sleep coach? Should it be a default? Should every postpartum family kind of budget for a sleep coach and seek one out? Is it only when they feel like they're struggling? What does it look like to you? What would you advise?
Generally I say, like, if you do feel like you're struggling, you have questions, you feel uncertain, you're not sure, then I think it's a great thing to, look into further. As far as the newborn age, like 0 to maybe 4 or 5 months, that age, I usually say, like, you're better off, investing a little bit of money in like a 30-minute session where we can kind of go over what newborn sleep looks like versus doing a lot of Googling and a lot of deep diving on social media. Because I talked to someone this morning where she was like, I was reading this and I was reading that. And she's like, I'm feeling so overwhelmed and so confused because a lot of the information was contradicting itself. And I said, I'm so glad you reached out, because here I am to kind of clarify that for you and to help you not feel so overwhelmed. So for the newborn stage, I think it's beneficial to have a call just to kind of go over, like, what does this look like? So you don't feel guilty. So you don't drive yourself nutty, doing all this research and being like overwhelmed and confused. As far as sleep coaching, that I kind of put the ball in parents' courts. Do you feel like what you're doing is working for you? If it is, keep doing it. Again, as long as people are following safe sleep practices, I'm not there to judge. So, like, I have families all the time where they're like, I rock my baby to sleep, and they're embarrassed to tell me. And I'm like, that's okay. Like, if it works for you, who am I to tell you to do it differently? If rocking your baby to sleep works for your family, that's great. Like, I'm there for the people where what they're doing isn't working. Their baby's not sleeping great. They're not sleeping great. Or what they're doing isn't sustainable, where they're like, we're spending, an hour bouncing our baby on a, exercise ball every night trying to get them to bed. And I'm like, I could see how that's exhausting.
Yeah.
Or they just simply want to have different sleep habits for their family, where they're like, we'd love to be able to put, our 10-month-old, for example, into the crib at bedtime, say goodnight, and know that unless something's wrong, unless they're sick or something, that they're going to sleep. And we don't have to worry, like, is he going to be up in 2 hours? Are we going to get up 3 times tonight? So those are kind of the reasons people usually reach out. Do I think everybody needs to sleep train? No, but it can be a very helpful solution for those where, like, sleep just feels like a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. I love your honesty. I love that you're here to support what people truly need. You're not out here saying, like, oh, absolutely, everyone needs a sleep coach.
Yeah, no.
Some of it is just getting, like, the baseline education and knowledge, and then being empowered by the information. And deciding on your own accord what your family needs to support all the various transitions of that kiddo. Something that you mentioned that I personally find is a pain point for me is social media. I always joke with my patients, but my arch nemesis is nurse TikTok and Dr. Google, because oftentimes patients and your clients get information online that either like conflicts or is confounding or is just not even accurate whatsoever. What are some of the things that you've either heard or read yourself via social media or been told by clients that you've found to be like the most egregious in the space of sleep health for newborns and babies?
Gosh, yeah. I mean, I've had people come to me saying that, the account they're following on Instagram was saying that, they should be sleep training their 2-month-old. And I'm like, your 2-month-old doesn't even have a circadian rhythm yet. Like, they don't have a body clock.
Yeah.
It's not mature yet. They don't have the capacity to consistently self-soothe. Like those self-soothing, signs that you're seeing are very primitive. Yeah. Asking a 2-month-old to, consistently self-soothe is like asking a 2-month-old to crawl. They're not developmentally ready. So I've seen stuff like that. Yeah. I've seen a lot of, on Facebook, like, moms asking other moms for like medical advice, for sleep advice, and, don't feed your, 3-month-old at night. And a lot of 3-month-olds still need feeds at night. So I've seen a lot of this type of advice, or people coming to me saying, this is what I read, or this is what I saw. So a lot of like, inappropriate advice on when to start sleep training, a lot of inappropriate comments on the fact that people think sleep training is cruel and just cry it out, or judging parents for seeking information.
Yeah.
A lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. You said it and I'll echo, knowledge is power. And so it hurts me when there's this like sense of shame that's dealt out when people are seeking out support and knowledge to help them figure out this crazy transition, not only for them as parents, but their babies. Like you said, babies go from such a drastically different environment to figuring out how to live in our world. And so, of course, it's new for everyone involved. Everyone deserves to get as much information as possible. As we wrap things up, you obviously are an incredible wealth of resources. And like I said, I personally am probably going to go back to this episode, fast forward a couple of years if we start our own family and be like, okay, Tracie said this, Tracie said that. But what are other resources that you either turn your clients to, or do you recommend for anyone who's listening if they want to get more information in addition to working with a gentle sleep coach if it's needed? What are either books, websites, things that you would recommend?
Yeah. So, I mean, as far as like, websites or books, the Sleep Lady, sleeplady.com, she's the gentle, certification program that I trained under. She's got a lot of really great books and resources. She has a whole directory of coaches. I'm listed under there as well. But that would be a source that I would feel comfortable recommending parents to.
Yeah.
But, as I said, I'm not a big fan of, first of all, I think tired parents don't have a lot of time to read. So there's that, but not doing too much online.
Yeah.
Because as a layperson, you don't know, what is evidence-based, what is not. So I'm sure you see this as a medical professional, like, you probably see something online going, oh, that's not accurate.
Yeah.
If it were me reading it, I wouldn't know that. And so, as a sleep coach, I can look at information and go, well, that's not accurate. But, the parent that lives down the street from me is not going to know that. And so I tell people, like, it's just so much better not to go down that rabbit hole and just maybe seek a referral to a sleep specialist.
Yeah.
To kind of get some evidence-based information. And I usually also tell parents, like, look up the sleep specialist's information. Like, I'm very upfront with my training curriculum and everything on my site. So you can kind of feel comfortable about who I am and what my background is and the time and continued energy I put into training. I still take continuing education. I always believe I've got more to learn.
Yes.
So, so this way you can also feel like you're finding someone that, fits your parenting style, you feel comfortable working with, based on their training and experience.
Yeah. Lovely. And Tracie, how would someone find you? Tell us, you've been so gracious with your time, giving so much helpful information over this past hour or so. But if someone was looking to seek you out, how would they find you? Please give a plug to your wonderful company. Go ahead.
So I am Restwell Baby. So my website is restwellbaby.com. And as I said, I'm not the biggest fan of doing lots of, research on social media, but I am on there. I sort of feel like sometimes you do have to have that presence. And I am at Restwell Baby Sleep on Instagram and at Restwell Baby on Facebook. So I am out there sharing my information. But, for me, I don't like to spend tons of my time on social media. Yeah. I would rather put my energy into working with parents. Yeah. Because that's my passion. As a mom that was formerly sleep deprived, I know what a game changer it was for me to kind of just get the education and the support. So that's just what I'm looking to, like you said, pay it back and help other parents.
I love that. And with our final moments, we've covered, for me, at least as an OB, it feels like the full spectrum of topics and issues around newborns and that first year of life. Any other sage words of advice that you'd like to give as I'm going to put in quotes, a recovering sleep deprived mom?
I mean, my favorite quote is "This too shall pass." So I also like to kind of remind parents, because it's so hard when you're in the thick of it, that this too shall pass. And there is a light at the end of the tunnel, So in those first few months of life, when you're like, your baby's too little for sleep training, there is a light. So if the sleep isn't in a good place, you can always work on it, or if you're in just a hard stage, those terrible twos, they can be a really real thing. There is a light. And if you need help, there's support there. You know what I mean? Whether it's with a sleep coach or a behaviorist or a parent coach, there's lots of wonderful professionals out there that, truly want to help. It's a very heart-centered business. When you're working with families, everyone that I've personally met that is working, helping families, it's all coming from a heart-centered place of, like you said, these are people that have either had, an experience in their life that has put them in this, or they are just those, those helpers out in this world that just want to, help, especially these postpartum parents adjust to this life. It's not easy. There's no training manual.
Nope.
There's no course you take. Nope. I mean, you have to take the test to learn to drive. There's all these steps you have to go through for other things in life. I remember when they brought me my first baby and they were like, you can go home from the hospital. I was like, wait, what?
What do I do?
You just luckily I had babysat growing up. So I had some experience, but you really kind of get thrown to the wolves, and it's really great to know that there are professionals out there, especially nowadays, that want to help.
Yeah. Professionals like you, professionals like me. There's so many of us who are in this space who are just trying to lift birthers and their families up. And so, Tracie, thank you for doing your part. Thank you for taking your pain and struggles with your first child and recognizing, oh man, there's ways that I can pay this forward. And you've obviously continued to be a positive impact in the community. So grateful for your time today. Can't wait for people to hear our conversation today, and just, really appreciate you.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. This was just so much fun, and I've loved learning more about you as well.
Yes, you're so kind. Thank you very much for listening to The Golden Hour, the podcast community where moms and moms-to-be can hear stories from other mothers and learn from top experts in pregnancy and postpartum care. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share with your friends so we can reach more people like you. You can visit goldenhour.fm for more information, resources, and all other episodes. If you have any requests, questions, or suggestions for future episodes, please email me at hello@goldenhour.fm or leave us a comment at goldenhour.fm on Instagram. Looking forward to seeing you in the next episode. Until then, stay golden.